Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Stewart, and today I'm joined by Paul Powers. He's the co-founder and CEO over at Physna, and we're going to talk product market fit. Before we jump in, founders, let's be real. Scaling a company is tough. You're juggling product, revenue, hiring, and a million other things. But what if you had a proven framework and expert guidance to help you navigate that chaos? That's where our founder coaching program comes in. Whether you're finding your first customers or fine-tuning your go-to-market strategy, we're here to help you build a business that scales, well, predictably. Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. With that said, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having
me.
I'd
love to jump in. Talk to me about where the idea for Physna came from.
Sure. So I was actually in Germany practicing law at the time, focused on intellectual property law. And we had this problem where we couldn't find 3D things. We were really struggling with searches. So like in patent law, the big thing is like, okay, well, does this already exist out in the market, or did this part potentially, in a lawsuit, like did someone steal the CAD drawing for it or something? And so we would look for the CAD drawings. We could never find them with images or text alone. And I looked for a 3D search tool, and I found some, but they don't really work. And even if it did, they're only looking at the outside of the part and not the inside. So you're not actually getting a whole lot of data on how things are related. So I started talking to people like in mechanical engineering, people who were in data science, manufacturing, and I'm just like looking for a tool, right? I'm just like, do you guys have a way of solving this? And they're like, no. And actually, it's a big problem over here too, because we end up designing the same thing over and over again. And when we need to find a part, we use part numbers, but as well order the exact same thing from 100 people, not realizing it. We'll have things in inventory that are identical to each other, not realize it, and then spend a fortune trying to find a replacement. Meanwhile, the plant's not operating, and all these horror stories. I'm like, that's crazy. So like, there's not. And then the more I dug into it, I realized, okay, that the problem is that these 3D models are in different file formats. And these formats represent 3D differently to the computer. So I'm like, what an amazing opportunity to bridge the gap between the physical world and the digital world, right? Like bridge that gap and there's so many capabilities that would come from that. And so realizing that no one had actually done that, we started Physna, which is short for physical DNA. And that's exactly what we do.
Very cool. So how do you go from being a lawyer, trying to find a solution for yourself, to actually starting the company? Did you do any validation? I mean, obviously, it sounds like in your search, you came across a lot of companies that were struggling with it already. Help me kind of paint the picture of like what happened next.
So I'm a total nerd, and I'm not a lawyer. I got a law degree and worked very briefly as one, but I don't think of myself that way. I never wanted to be one either. I was just, I got recruited into a law firm like almost immediately when I went to law school in Germany, because they were like, oh, you're an American, you can help us with English stuff. And it paid well and helped me get through college. But also I was running a company at the time already. Started off as a translation company, ended up becoming a tech tool for law firms and governments to like be able to share data with each other securely. And then from there built out a tech product company, and that was like for, again, professional services and collaboration. And so, I've been an entrepreneur ever since I was 16. I've always had something going, or some kind of a company or whatever. Knew that was my passion. Like that's what I wanted to do, but I just didn't know what the right product was, like what to really focus on and get excited about, until I came across that problem. And I'm like, oh my God, this is such a monumental opportunity. Like if we can actually solve this, this would be massive. And so to validate the product, I used my own money, moved back to the US, took out a $300,000 loan. And I'm not sure why the bank gave it to me, because I had already left the law firm. If this doesn't work, and go bankrupt, because that was everything I had at the time. So I used that to hire some people who could code and who really knew the space well and the math. And we almost completely ran out of cash before it actually started to work. Raised money from friends and family, found out that solution didn't work as well as we thought, found a different way to solve it. Eventually it was working well enough to raise money from VCs, and then we found like ways to optimize it. And so we're always optimizing the technology, but it's really, really powerful. And the way we validated it was I'll never forget the moment that it actually worked, right? I was like having almost a panic attack about where we were financially at the time. I'm like, man, I'm not going to be able to, first of all, I couldn't raise because I don't have anything that works. And secondly, I wouldn't want to, because I don't have anything that works. I don't want to say that. I just wouldn't feel good about doing that. But then like one of the engineers that I had hired called me over and said, hey, Paul, come over here, look at this. And it was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen, but it was just two like dark mode screens with just code, and the numbers came out. like the same on two different things. And we were jumping for joy, but anybody else looking at that monitor been like, what the hell?
Yeah.
We didn't have a user interface or anything at the time, so it was just code. And then to showcase what we did, we went to an event. We actually rented out this place called Union Hall down in downtown Cincinnati, and we called everybody we had met. So we got like 300 people from the venture scene and the startup scene, and we did a demo. It was a live demo. I thought we had already tested it though. Like we knew this was going to work. Turns out, no, we hadn't. We actually hadn't tested this beforehand, and I found out afterwards, which is good. What we did was we uploaded a 3D model of the Crew Tower, which at the time was the biggest building in Cincinnati, and there were two models. One was Crew Tower, one was another Crew Tower, different file types. So it's kind of showing that Physna can see the match, right? Even across file types. And I asked them to just put something in one of them, right? So we can find things inside of things, right? It's not just the external. And he put a flea on like the 34th floor, one of the buildings, and it was to scale. So we had, by the time we had like three visualizers, right? The model A, model B, and then the similarities with the differences. So in the middle, was the differences, and it looked like absolutely nothing. And I'm like, oh my god, did the software break or something?
Did it not work?
And I'm like, maybe it's just really small. Thank God I had that idea because it wasn't even a pixel. It was blank. I just scrolled for like a solid 30 seconds, and I'm panicking, thinking because I've started to scroll, I'm going to look really stupid if there's nothing there. But it actually ended up becoming really dramatic because when I finally zoomed in all the way, I saw the flea. Everyone was like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" But yeah, I totally knew that was going to happen. I had no idea what I was looking at. So that was the
That's
validation
amazing.
for us that it worked, really, really worked.
You're insane. So you've got a demo. You haven't tested that it works, and you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to rent the biggest hall I can and invite 300 people.
Well, we knew that the software worked, but the user interface it was very basic, very early. Like we had barely even seen the user interface. It was so new, right? And it was like I can't show them code because it's going to bore the hell out of everybody, right? Like you have to show them what the code means, and
It could have gone a different direction. Talk to me about the decision to have everybody in like come to a big event and have a big reveal like that.
well, I got to know a lot of people in the community, and made a lot of friends, and wanted to and I thought, how do you get the word out about something like this? We didn't really have any money at the time, so it was like we were low on money. We need to raise money from investors. So I thought, well, I don't want to raise institutional money until we get to a certain point. So the first couple million we raised was through like high net worth individuals. And so the idea was let's invite them here to look at what we have, right? To have this reveal. It'll be fun. It'll be a great networking opportunity and potentially help us raise, right? So we don't have to go to each one individually. We can just show them what we do. And if they're interested, they can approach us about maybe investing. And that ended up working.
That's a really great idea. I haven't come across too many people that have done that. It does sound very, like take this in the most generous possible interpretation. Very Field of Dreamsy. Like if I book the event, they will come and then they'll give me money.
Well, not everybody gave us money, but we didn't need that, right? We just needed a few people who wanted to invest, and so we were able to get that, which was great. And it wasn't that simple. It's not like we had an event and then money showed up in the bank. It was like they wanted to talk to us. They may have more meetings and all this other fun stuff. So it took a little bit of time, but that's how we sourced some of the initial capital.
Next time when you send out the invites, just put like RSVP, like please. It's like black tie and bring checkbook.
Exactly. Should have done that. Yeah.
So when did the first customer land?
So years later, because the software is very complicated what it does. And what we really wanted to do is figure out what use case to pursue. Like initially, I was blinded by my own use case, right? I thought, okay, well, IP protection is going to be the way to go. But when I talked to people about it, they were like, okay, that's great, but who's going to pay for it? How much do you charge for it? And how are you going to be able to search across the whole globe? I'm like, no, that'll cost me a fortune. So then, so I'm like, okay, actually, this is going to be more complicated than I thought. And the problem wasn't that we couldn't find a use case. It was that we had too many use cases in our mind, right, for this software. And beyond what we had in our mind, we were just in talking to people, we actually cataloged them. We over 300 different use cases for that software. In various industries, areas you would never expect. Right? And so we're like, okay, what do we go after? And where's the need the strongest and most immediate? And eventually we realized, okay, it's going to be in manufacturing. We ended up going after engineering. So a couple of years later, we ended up, our first customer, this is again, once we actually built the software, was Magna. And it was for, to use it for automation of classification of parts, deduplication, identifying when they are buying the same thing from various vendors, et cetera. So that was the first one. And, but the way that we pitched it was a little bit different than how they ended up using it. We pitched it more like, this will automate your 3D design because we can do autofill, right? I mean, you start to design something, Physna is deterministic, right? So it'll say, yeah, I've seen that little bit of geometry before, and it's this part over here, right? But that requires that you use the APIs and do a connection with CAD.
So tell me the story of signing that first customer. So you did all this research, you did this really, really hard thing, but you hadn't quite nailed the exact use case. So what did it look like when it kind of finally came together? Where did they come from? What was that conversation like?
It was an automotive company, right? And big parts manufacturer, and we're interested in using us. Again, the initial use case is just accelerating 3D design. But the more they saw the tool and the more they were able to experience it, because back then we did like really long free POCs. So we let them use it for a while, right? And today we do a little bit differently, but it's still, they were able to experience it. And they're like, oh my God, this is so helpful in organizing our data and understanding how these models are related and how they're going to perform, what they're going to cost, et cetera. So they were like, hey, we want to go ahead and do a license. So we were over the moon because we had, we had a paying customer finally, and all of our investors were a big sigh of relief. Like, oh, good, you're finally deciding to monetize this thing, right? But it was a pretty straightforward process. It took a little while, right? Because we were brand new and they were like, do we have any references? And it's like, no, but we'd love it if you were one. We still don't have any other customers yet. And so it's accelerated from there.
So first customer came from the kind of research step. You were having these conversations. Where did you start to see the first kind of repeatable customer channel taking shape?
So it started really with relationships. I mean, we spend virtually nothing on any kind of marketing, even to today. We're not big marketers. It really comes from word of mouth. I mean, I think every customer, I can say, came from word of mouth at this point. I don't think we've got anyone that's come in because of some, they saw, maybe they saw us somewhere and it wasn't word of mouth directly, but most of the time they hear about us and they're looking to solve a problem. And right now, our proverbial phone's ringing off the hook because of tariffs and Doge, and people are looking to save money. And the main application of Physna today, the way that we market it, because it's much faster to sell this way. Hey, Physna can not only search your own database, it can also search globally, right? We have this parts from all these suppliers and manufacturers, and we can tell you, okay, what is the thing in front of you, right? Whether if you don't even have a 3D model, we can tell you what that thing is. And we can tell you if you have an inventory, even if it's under a different name. And if you don't, we can tell you, here's who sells that part. And if nobody sells it, we can tell you who can manufacture it, because our AI is advanced enough to analyze that part and say, okay, this is what has to happen. This is how you would have to build this. And so we can tell you these are the companies that actually have that technology or that capability to manufacture that for you.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Phones are ringing off the hook just because of the chaos that's happening right now. I want to go back a little bit. So one, congrats on that. That's amazing. Like all this hard work to get to this magic moment of like suddenly now this is the most relevant thing that could be possible. If we think back, describe the moment you realized you might have product market fit.
It really did come when we started to think about this problem from a supply chain perspective. Before, we didn't have the ability to search with 2D really accurately and even text really accurately, again, powered by 3D, but again, much easier on the end user. Was the Air Force had actually contacted us about helping them out, and we want to direct to SBIR phase 2, which is really rare. Normally you have to go through phase 1 first, et cetera, and this is the whole process. But we won it very quickly, and it was to solve this problem of them not being able to find parts that they needed to order. And they're like, look, we need to be able to search globally, so we need to build out that product. And then we also don't have the 3D models most of the time, right? So we need to be able to search with an image. And because it was SBIR, it wasn't a ton of money, but it was an incentive to go build it, so we did. It turns out that it worked extremely well. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is something that we can market everywhere, because this is a powerful, very relevant tool for everybody. And so even before tariffs, even before Doge, that really started to accelerate the growth of the business. But just because we realized, oh my God, this is such an easy thing to sell. But when you try to go into the engineering route, it's more complicated. They want you to integrate with all these different tools. They want to test it. They want to have 100 people to give input on it, and it just takes time, right? But on the supply chain side, the way that we typically do demos now is we'll say, like, look, give us a few examples of things that you're struggling to find, or things that you don't think you have in inventory, or whatever, right? And we'll just show you the outcome. We can actually save them money in the demo. Sometimes it's been massive amounts of money. Like, here, we saved $4 million today, right? And 20 minutes. And, imagine what you could do if you had the software, right? And so it's a really easy sales process. We probably should charge more for the software than we do. But
that's super interesting. Something you said earlier was you used to, when you first started, you would do these free long POCs, and now you can do it on the call. I'm curious what the sales process kind of looks like between when you were first getting started and what you're doing now?
Well, at the beginning, we wanted, but the software was fairly new. And so one of the reasons we did POCs was not just for the sake of the customers, also for us. We genuinely wanted the feedback. Like, okay, well, tell us what it's like using this. There's so many different ways you can configure the software. We want to know, like, did we do it right? Or is it too complicated? Is it not, are there not enough options? Or is not enough tools? Or you want more or less? Or like, what should we do here? And so we had POCs also to get that feedback. But now that we're selling more into the supply chain type area, they don't necessarily need to integrate it with everything else. They can if they want to do inventory searching, and if they want to, certainly if they want to use the engineering capabilities or et cetera, then yeah, it's great to integrate your data. But if you don't, you can just start using it like today, right? And so they don't need to be using it for a long time to see what it does. It's also very simple. What we do is really straightforward. If you're just using it for procurement, it's like, okay, take a picture and it finds it for you. How many times do you have to see that to understand? Like, why would you do a long POC there, right? Let's just show you live and go from there. And we found that to be a lot more effective.
Amazing. Really, really interesting that you spent all this time without just like proving out the tech, and then you've kind of made the transition, and now a significant market event has happened to make it significantly much more relevant than I think maybe it would be had all of that not happened. I'm curious what comes next for you.
A lot more growth in this space. I mean, we have the capacity for it, but we still have a relatively small customer base. So we're expanding rapidly. I'm trying to hire more people soon. I want to hire more salespeople to handle the inbound, which is a great problem to have, but still a problem. Then one of the capabilities I think is going to be really neat is that everything in Physna has an API. And what we're starting to see and having more and more discussions about is people using Physna in other products, other tech products, right? Again, where people don't even necessarily know that Physna is powering what they're doing. It's just making it a lot smarter, right? And that's what I'd like to see more of, is people who have totally different ideas about solving totally different problems. If Physna can help them solve that problem through an API, that's what I want to do. And that's why I think we're going to see a lot more growth in the future than what we have today. And those problems are really, really broad. If you think about it, everything physical is three-dimensional, right? It doesn't have to be a CAD model. It can be a scan. It can be, photogrammetry. It can just be a series of pictures or a video that you get the 3D data off of. And so even in areas like healthcare, right, there are tons of use cases for Physna, and science and research and data science, and you name it. I mean, it's very, very broad. So that's what I think we're going to see a lot more of in the future. Physna powering a lot of other tools, which I'm super excited about.
That's amazing. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing. If people want to learn more about Physna, or they got a question they want to reach out and get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to track you all down?
So go to our website, Physna, physna.com. Or you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find, Paul Powers. And that's typically a good way of getting a hold of me if you want to reach out about anything.
Right on. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll catch you all next time.